We're going to have, from an Australian perspective, our man Brad Walt, who works for NRL.com, but kicking it off with a guy called Gary Carter. And he writes for the Sun newspaper out of England. Gary, well, it's raised eyebrows here in New Zealand. So just explain what this change is in the tackle height for a start.
The tackle height change is essentially, normally, anything below the neck is legal, whereas for 2025 in the professional game, it's anything below the armpit. Next year, 2024, they're bringing it into the age grades, the under 18s and the under 20s and things like that. So, but essentially, it's going to give the professionals a year to get used to it, rather than change it now and have like 80 odd penalties a game. The professionals are going to have a year to get used to it.
Is this because of what's happening in rugby? Is that why the change is being initiated, because of those class action lawsuits which haven't appeared in league yet?
We asked, there is a class action lawsuit hanging over Rugby League over here at the moment. Now, we asked whether it was a response to that. They said no, because the class action actually hasn't been served yet. We all know it's happening, but the actual papers haven't been served. So officially, the Rugby Football League here don't know what they're answering to. But the move is essentially because of the threat of legal action and the threat of legal action going forward.
Because obviously this is why rugby has made all of its changes, and it feels a lot like, as far as rugby league goes, that it's dragging the chain and it's reacted rather slow to this. Would you agree?
No, I wouldn't say it's changed rather slow to it at all. I mean, over here, the rugby league rules are on a par with rugby union rules. If not, rugby league is a bit ahead. All of this is being led by the Rugby Football League, but the NRL are involved with it as well. Like Graham Annesley and people that have been up to date with the discussions, and the IRL, the International Rugby League, are also involved with it. They're also aware of it, but it is being led by the Rugby Football League over here, because essentially there is a threat of legal action over here, whereas with the NRL there isn't as yet. So that's why the NRL aren't implementing it as yet.
We still get, a lot of that shoulder tackles in the NRL, which go up to head height. Guys get put on report and things. Do you think it's going to get even lower because rugby union lowered its legal tackle height, community rugby, from shoulders to base of the sternum? Do you think it's going to get that low?
No, at the moment it's from the armpit downwards. So essentially it's from moving from the top of the shoulder to the bottom of the shoulder, about 8 to 10 centimetres down. Essentially, I equate it, the simplest way I can equate it is it's telling players they have to tackle rather than hit opponents, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rather than just run into opponents, you have to tackle them almost like tackling properly again.
What has been the reaction to it from just league fans, pundits, commentators?
It's been a real dichotomy of opinions over here. You listen to some rugby league fans would say it's the death of the sport, but removing the shoulder charge was the death of the sport. The rugby league, if you believe some fans, rugby league's died 6 times already in the last 10 years.
Right.
But you listen to any of the coaches, the ex-players, the medical professionals, it's essentially something that's had to happen, because if the sport hadn't done this now, it would have probably died in 5 years when the legal case comes eventually, and they'll have been shown to have not mitigated any of the dangers. So the lawyers then will just pounce on the sport and say, well, you've not done this, you've not done that, you've not done the other. And it gives them a more convincing case, whereas what the sport's done now, it's mitigated the dangers to the point of, well, we've done all we can, basically.
In one of your Twitter comments, you quoted Dennis Betts as saying, and his name here is synonymous with the Warriors and their opening season, of course. Our dream is for the players that play rugby league to be able to remember it after they finished playing. I thought that was a really apt thing to say.
I thought that was the best comment, because Dennis actually sits on all these rules and recommendations have been brought forward by what's called the Brain Health Group. Now, Dennis sits on the Brain Health Group, which is advice the Rugby Football League. They've been working with coaches over here since March this year. So it's not something they've just thought up and just gone, right, well, this is what you need to do. We've thought of this last week. It's 8-9 months of work that's gone into it, including trials on lowering the tackle heights in the academy level here, which is the under-18s. They've got the data from that, and it's all backed up by scientific data. Dennis's comment about them needing to remember it, or our dream is for players to remember their careers, was really, really sort of rammed it home, I thought.
Same. I thought that's why I asked you about it. As far as the concussion spotters go, what a weird job description that is. What kind of qualifications do those people have, or must they have?
Well, I'd imagine. Well, they must be medically qualified for a start.
Yes.
They'd be medically qualified and independent of the two clubs taking part in the games that they are watching. It's essentially, I think the NRL has concussion spotters anyway, even now. But say a doctor's on the pitch treating one player, and another one has a suspected concussion that they won't see because they're treating the other player. The concussion spotter has the replay capability of looking at the replays and then conversing with that doctor on the touchline, say, look, such and such a player has a suspected concussion. I spotted it while you were treating another player on the pitch. I suggest you have a look at him or get him off for HIA.
This is Gary Carter with us. He's director of GGC Media. He's a rugby league and a football reporter for The Sun as well. Just before we go, thank you so much for your time, Gaz. Just in terms of the quality of the English competition to the NRL, there's always these arguments. What's it like from your perspective? Just rate both comps.
Anyone in English Rugby League admits that the NRL is stronger. The best players are in the NRL because there's more money in the NRL. The closest way I could equate it is the NRL is equivalent to Premier League football here. It's the most watched sport. It's the sport that attracts the big TV contracts, and the clubs therefore have the financial power to wield and get the best players on those bigger contracts. Whereas over here, the game has come on leaps and bounds, I think, over the past 3 or 4 years in terms of quality. And there's more and more players now showing that they are capable of achieving that highest level, as we saw in England's recent Test series against Tonga. Now, Tonga was essentially a team of NRL players, and England essentially wiped the floor with him for 3 games, which gives the game over here real confidence that it is producing the players that can compete in the NRL if they want to head to the NRL. I mean, also, essentially, a lot of the rugby league players here are in their mid-20s. If you're a fellow who's in your mid-20s, and you're asked to be paid to play in Australia or New Zealand for a year or two, you've got to do it, aren't you? It's a fairly simple argument, I think.
Devlin.
Yeah, the next rule.
The platform.
Brad, we've just spoken with Gary, and this is a fascinating topic to talk about because obviously it has massive implications for the whole of the sport, not just in the Northern Hemisphere, the Southern Hemisphere. And he says that Graham Annesley has been over in England, and so he is all over this. When is the NRL going to introduce something similar?
So, firstly, I think the NRL is like all rugby league in Australia is ahead of the curve in the UK, in that a lot of the things that are being introduced in the UK, particularly at grassroots level and at community level and at junior level, are already in place in New South Wales and Queensland and have been for a couple of years. And there have been obviously changes at NRL level around, what's acceptable in terms of contact with the head. The Super League are introducing independent doctors, spotters, concussion spotters, all of those sort of things, which have been in place in the NRL for some time now. Some of the other issues or some of the other things that they're looking to introduce over there, like player loadings, which is, I think it is off the top of my head, 20,000 minutes per season for a forward and 25,000 minutes per season for a back, which they play a lot more games in the Super League. So 25,000 minutes equates to 34 games. Well, in the NRL is 24 rounds and finals. So players are playing under those amounts anyway. Obviously the headlines have been around tackling heights, target areas, and that's not something that's actually coming into the Super League straight away. So I don't think there's any need to rush something through or to make any changes. But I can tell you that they're International Rugby League is, I suppose, setting up a panel to look at this, which will involve representatives from New Zealand, from Australia, from the UK, and from some other bodies as well, just looking at what the differences are, what the best procedures are, or the best policies are to be introduced to try and get something across the game.
Do you think, like I do, that unless it is enforced, and it will be enforced, that in 25 years we won't see this game? I mean, what Gary was saying as well is that same rugby class action is just sitting there on the back burner at the moment. It hasn't officially been lodged in court, but it is going to be. And once that happens, the sport is in a real quandary, isn't it? Because the lawyers, the clever dick lawyers, they work for the highfalutin firms and they do this kind of stuff pro bono because they want the glory of their name associated with it and attached to it. And eventually the threat of the payouts is going to enforce it regardless of whether fans want it or not. It has to come down. Players have to be protected, and also the health of those that have played has got to be taken into account. Now, I know that it is, and it's much more acknowledged, but, it has been a shameful secret for a long time.
Well, I think sports have to adapt if they've got evidence, things pointing to the fact that it may be affecting players' health. Then sports have to adapt and have to make changes, and if they don't, that's when they are in trouble. So there's no doubt that it's said that sports, when they're confronted with evidence, and obviously there's been a lot of research done on this topic, they're trying to avoid contact with the head, and they're taking steps around it. I've seen a video with Chris Brooks, the England team doctor, and he's been a doctor in the Super League for a long time, who's been heading this up, and this isn't just about rugby league. This is about sport in general in the UK. It's a government mandated, and he's talking about soccer, and in terms of player loads and how much time players spend on the pitch, coming on the field over the course of the season or in the course of years, where I suppose that obviously the longer you play, the higher the risk. But he was talking about saying there's a lot of evidence around heading in soccer and the amount of times a player heads a ball. And I know that at junior level, in certain leagues across the world, there's headings banned in some leagues, and even I think at the top level in parts of the UK in some of the competitions, there's restrictions on how many times a player can supposedly head a ball in a game or per week or per season or whatever, and they actually count those statistics now. So sport is changing and sport is evolving, and obviously sport has to change when confronted, I suppose, by these issues and by this evidence. But will it change the game? Some people are saying, this is going to change the fabric of the game. Well, like, contact with the head's always been outlawed, and now what they're trying to do is just lower the target area so that the risk of, I suppose, accidental contact is less. And obviously they'll be penalising that, so that people do tackle lower. It's going to take, no doubt, it's going to be interesting to watch. It's going to be fascinating to watch. It's going to see what the impact is, and it is going to take, I imagine it will take some time to adapt. But people were outraged when they said the shoulder charge was going to be banned. People were outraged when they said punching and fighting was going to be banned. It's going to be an automatic sin bin if you throw a punch. And people have got used to that. I don't think it's changed the game. I think the game is more skillful and probably a better product to watch than it's ever been before.
Devlin.
You better believe it!
The platform.